On our wedding night, I discovered a shocking truth about my husband. He needed his mother's presence during our first night together. My name is Emma, and I'm 25 years old. Our wedding day was, quite simply, everything I had ever dreamed it would be. As James and I stood hand in hand under the archway of blooming roses, our vows echoed softly under the vast blue sky. Our friends and family gathered in a beautifully decorated garden, watching with teary eyes and broad smiles as we promised to love and cherish each other. The air was filled with the scent of summer flowers, the sounds of laughter, and the gentle strains of violin that seemed to weave magic into the atmosphere. It was a day marked by joy, a celebration of love in its purest form, encapsulating the promise of a new beginning. As James and I planned our wedding, the usual joys and stresses of preparing for such a grand day were accompanied by the subtle shadows of James's past. Hints of his hidden scars began to emerge amidst conversations about table settings and guest lists. There were fleeting moments when his eyes would cloud over, or he'd fall silent, seemingly gripped by a memory only he could see. I noticed these instances, the small cracks in his otherwise sturdy facade. My heart ached to know what weighed on him, but I respected his privacy fiercely. James was a man who valued his inner sanctum, and I loved him all the more for his complexities. So, I did not press, choosing instead to focus on our love and the excitement of starting our new life together. In the whir of wedding preparations, my relationship with Mrs. Miller, James's mother, took on a life of its own. From the outset, she was more than just a future mother-in-law. She was a presence of warmth and understanding, a comforting anchor in the sometimes overwhelming sea of wedding decisions. Her intuition about people was uncanny, and her ability to navigate James's moods proved invaluable, especially as the wedding drew closer and his episodes of withdrawal became more frequent. One chilly afternoon, as we pored over an old family photo album searching for inspiration for our wedding slideshow, Mrs. Miller shared stories of James as a boy, his mischievous smile, his boundless energy, and also his quiet moments. She spoke with a nostalgic smile, but her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness, a mother's concern that had weathered many unseen storms. It was during these intimate gatherings that I began to understand the depth of their bond and how deeply the threads of past traumas were woven into the fabric of James's current being. Her role in our lives became even more pronounced as she helped me navigate through the complexities of bonding with a man whose heart had been scarred at such a young age. She had an exquisite tact in guiding me on how to be there for James, never overstepping yet always providing just enough insight to help me connect with him on a deeper level. This delicate balance of distance and closeness in her advice helped me respect James's pace without feeling shut out. When it came time to choose gifts for James, be it his birthday or Christmas, Mrs. Miller proved an indispensable ally. She had an exceptional knack for knowing exactly what would touch James's heart. Each gift we selected was not just a material item but a symbol, a message in a bottle sent into the depths of his heart, affirming love, understanding, and acceptance. Shopping trips with Mrs. Miller for these gifts became our little tradition, times filled with laughter and shared secrets, weaving me deeper into the family tapestry. The most memorable moment came a few weeks before the wedding. After a long day spent finalizing seating arrangements and menu choices, Mrs. Miller invited me for tea at her house. The house was quiet, a soft classical melody playing in the background, lending an air of serenity to the room. We sat in her sun-drenched living room, surrounded by plants that thrived under her careful attention, mirroring the nurturing nature of her personality. With a gentle, almost reverential tone, Mrs. Miller said she had something special for me. From an old, ornately carved wooden box, she pulled out a small velvet case. Inside was a ring, a beautiful antique piece that had belonged to James's great-grandmother. The ring was delicate, its band worn thin by time, its stone still catching the light with a fiery sparkle. As she placed it in my hand, her fingers lingered over mine, her touch conveying layers of meaning. "This ring," she began, her voice soft but clear, "is more than just a family heirloom. It is a symbol of our acceptance and trust in you, Emma. It's a welcome into our family. A family that, like this ring, has weathered many storms and survived. It is a testament not just to the past but to the future we hope to build with you in it." The weight of the ring in my palm felt monumental, as if the small circle of metal encapsulated more than just familial history. It was a binding promise, a token of faith. The ring, with its intricate engravings and warm golden hue, symbolized the merging of past and future, of memories and hopes. As I slipped it onto my finger, it felt like a shield, imbued with the strength and love of the women who had worn it before me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked up at Mrs. Miller, overwhelmed by the depth of her gesture. Her eyes met mine, mirroring my emotions. At that moment, I understood the sacredness of what she had given me. It was an affirmation of my place beside James, an endorsement of my role not just as his wife but as a daughter to her. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise to honor the love and trust you've placed in me." She nodded, her smile tender. I know you will, my dear. You already have. On the morning of our wedding, the early sun painted the sky with strokes of pink and orange, promising a day as radiant as the love James and I shared. The gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the soft, melodious chirps of morning birds. As I awoke, a flutter of excitement danced in my stomach, and a smile spread across my face. The kind that comes from deep within, knowing that today I would marry the man I loved. The venue was nestled on the edge of a lush, sprawling garden that bloomed with life, each petal and leaf vibrant under the warm glow of the sun. It was here, among the weaving paths and fragrant blooms, that we had chosen to bind our lives together. The garden was more than just a venue. It was a reflection of our relationship, natural, blooming, and beautifully wild. As the morning progressed, the air filled with the sounds of preparation. The clink of dishes, the soft rustling of floral arrangements being perfected, and the gentle directives of the wedding planner creating a symphony of anticipation. Each vendor moved with purpose, their expertise turning our vision into reality. The tables were set with fine linen, each piece of cutlery placed with precision. Centerpieces of wildflowers and millery adorned the tables, their colors popping against the crisp white tablecloths. The ceremony area was set in a quiet corner of the garden, under a large oak tree whose branches stretched out as if to embrace the gathering beneath its sturdy boughs. A simple wooden arch stood decorated with white and soft pink roses intertwined with ivy and sprigs of lavender. The chairs for our guests were arranged in a gentle arc, each one adorned with a small bouquet of flowers tied with a ribbon that fluttered lightly in the breeze. Guests began to arrive, their faces bright with joy and attire colorful, adding to the festive atmosphere. The hum of their greetings and laughter blended into the background music, a carefully chosen playlist of soft romantic tunes that James and I had spent nights curating. Each song held a memory, a piece of our journey, and now they played for all to hear, setting the stage for the promises we were about to make. As the time drew near, my heart began to beat a little faster, the reality of the moment settling in. Accompanied by my father, I took a deep breath and stepped into the hidden pathway that would lead me to the archway. The sight that greeted me took my breath away. There, waiting for me, was James. He stood tall and sure, his suit tailored perfectly to him, complementing his form. His hair was styled neatly, and his face held an expression of awe and tenderness as he watched me approach. The walk down the aisle felt like a lifetime and a moment all at once. With each step, I moved closer not just to James but to the new life we would build together. The eyes of our loved ones followed me, but all I could see was him. As I reached his side, his hand reached out for mine, a silent promise of support and love that sent warmth spreading through me. The ceremony was a heartfelt exchange of vows that we had written ourselves. James's voice was steady but filled with emotion as he spoke his vows. His words painted a picture of our past and a promise of our future, each sentence carefully chosen to convey his love and commitment. My vows echoed his in sentiment, spoken through tears of happiness that streamed freely down my cheeks. There was laughter too, as we interjected little anecdotes of our life together, making the ceremony deeply personal and joyously authentic. As we exchanged rings, the symbol of our endless love and the seal of our vows, the oak tree above us seemed to stand a little taller, its leaves rustling as if in applause. The kiss that followed was both a seal of our promises and a celebration, met with cheers and clapping from our guests. The reception that followed was a blur of dancing, eating, and heartfelt speeches. The first dance was to a song that had seen us through our hardest times, its lyrics now a testament to the strength of our bond. As James spun me around the dance floor, the world fell away, leaving only the sound of the music and the feeling of being completely and utterly loved. Our families and friends made speeches that brought both roars of laughter and tender tears. Each word spoken was a thread added to the tapestry of our day, weaving a memory that would hold strong in the years to come. The food was exquisite, each bite a burst of flavor, a celebration of our day. The cake, a simple yet elegant design of white frosting and flowers, was cut amidst cheers, its sweetness a perfect metaphor for the life awaiting us. As the day transitioned into evening, the lights dimmed to a golden hue, casting shadows that danced along with the guests. James and I moved among our loved ones, our hearts brimming with happiness. Every moment felt suspended in time, from the heartfelt speeches that brought tears to our eyes to our first dance, where we swayed to a melody that spoke only to our souls. The world around us blurred into a background of sparkling lights and soft music, with the only focus being the profound connection between us. Yet, as the night wore on and the last of the guests bid their farewells, a subtle shift occurred. The exhaustion from the day's emotions and festivities began to settle in, and with it came a thickness in the air, as if it were laden with unspoken truths. I sensed it most acutely when we finally retreated to our room, the sanctuary where we had planned to end our perfect day. But instead of the comforting silence I had anticipated, there was a palpable tension, a stirring of something deep and unnerving that I couldn't quite identify. James, who had been the bastion of strength throughout our relationship, seemed suddenly distant. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by a nervous energy that thrummed quietly beneath his skin. I had always known there were aspects of his past that shadowed his bright smile, hints of dark chapters he had never fully disclosed. Our relationship had been built on a foundation of deep mutual respect and understanding, and I had learned to navigate the delicate balance between his openness and the secrets he guarded so closely. I respected his privacy, never pushing for more than he was willing to share, understanding that some wounds were deeply ingrained, etched into one's soul by experiences too painful to relive. The unexpected knock at our door came just as I was about to speak, to breach the subject that hung heavily between us. It was Mrs. Miller, James's mother, her presence on the threshold of our bridal suite as surprising as it was alarming. The sight of my husband whispering urgently with his mother in the dimly lit corridor was something I had not anticipated on our wedding night. The warmth and guidance Mrs. Miller had always extended to me felt suddenly invasive, her timing inexplicable. "Mom, I can't. Can you come in?" James's voice, barely a whisper, carried a weight I had never heard before. His words, though softly spoken, seemed to fill the room, making the walls close in around us. My heart raced with a mixture of confusion and concern, questions forming faster than I could voice them. As they stepped into our room, the space that had once felt like a haven now seemed too small, the air too thick, as if filled with the dense fog of impending revelations. Mrs. Miller's presence, although always a source of comfort in the past, now marked a moment of intrusion, an unexpected interruption in what should have been a private celebration of our union. Yet, the look in her eyes, one of deep empathy mixed with a mother's protective instinct, prompted me to pause, to reassess the situation that was unfolding before me. It was clear that this was not just a breach of newlywed privacy. It was a necessary intervention, a moment that James needed more than I had realized. Mrs. Miller's eyes flicked between James and me, her face etched with a mixture of apology and urgency. It was clear that this was not a mere intrusion but a necessity born of something deeper, something distressing. James, usually so composed, looked visibly shaken, his eyes pleading for understanding. "What's happening?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The air felt thick with unspoken truths, the kind that could alter the course of a relationship forever. There was a palpable pause, heavy with hesitation. Mrs. Miller glanced at James, who seemed momentarily lost for words, his gaze fixed on the floor. Then, gathering her resolve, she looked directly at me, her voice steady but soft. "Emma," she began, "there's something about James's past that you need to know. Something he might have struggled to tell you himself." Her words, though gentle, sliced through the silence with the sharpness of glass. My heart raced as my mind tried to piece together what she might reveal. The concern in her eyes and the anguish on James's face told me this wasn't something trivial. This was a moment that could redefine everything. After a brief pause, during which Mrs. Miller seemed to calculate her response, she turned to her son. "James, you need to explain. She deserves to hear this from you." James lifted his head slowly, meeting my eyes with an expression I had never seen before. It was a mixture of vulnerability, fear, and a plea for understanding. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling as he began. "When I was just 5 years old, something happened that changed everything," he started, his words coming slowly, as if each one carried immense weight. "A burglar broke into our home, into my bedroom. That night, under the cover of darkness, my world was shattered." He paused, the memory clearly painful to relive. His hands trembled slightly as he continued, his voice low but steady. "The intruder, he came through my window. I remember being frozen in terror, unable to cry out or move. It was the most helpless I've ever felt in my life. The room was utterly silent, save for the faint sound of James's breathing. I felt my chest tighten, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, as I imagined the fear and vulnerability of a little boy facing such a nightmare. My mom. She was the one who saved me," James continued, glancing briefly at Mrs. Miller, who nodded encouragingly. "She came running into the room when she heard the noise. She chased him off and held me close for the rest of the night. But after that, couldn't sleep. Not alone." His voice broke slightly, and he paused to steady himself. Every shadow, every sound. It felt like he was coming back. My mom started staying with me every night, holding me, telling me stories until I fell asleep. It was the only way I felt safe. James looked at me then, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never really grew out of it, Emma. Even now, when I'm anxious or overwhelmed, it feels like I'm that scared little boy again. And having someone close, someone I trust, helps me calm down." The weight of his words hung in the air, pressing down on my chest. It was a revelation I hadn't anticipated, a window into a part of James's life that explained so much yet felt so heavy to bear. My heart ached for him, the child who had faced such terror and the man who still carried those scars. Mrs. Miller stepped in then, her voice soft but firm. Emma, I know this is a lot to take in, but James has made incredible progress over the years. He's grown so much stronger. Still, there are moments when his anxiety resurfaces, and he needs reassurance. It's not a sign of weakness. It's just a part of who he is. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. I understand, I managed to say, though my voice was barely audible. I wish I had known sooner. James reached for my hand then, his touch hesitant but grounding. I didn't want to burden you with this, he said, his voice filled with guilt. But I should have told you. I'm sorry. I squeezed his hand, my tears finally spilling over. You're not a burden, James, I said firmly. You never could be. We're in this together, okay? Whatever you need, I'm here. The relief on his face was immediate, a small, hesitant smile breaking through the storm of emotions. Mrs. Miller stepped back, her expression one of quiet approval. I'll leave you two now, she said softly. You have each other. And that's enough. As she left the room, James and I sat in silence for a moment, his hand still in mine. Then, slowly, he leaned into me, resting his head against my chest. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him close as his breathing began to slow. The weight of the day, of the revelations, and of his past seemed to dissipate in that embrace, leaving only a profound sense of connection. In that moment, I knew our journey together wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges and shadows to face. But I also knew we were stronger together. The love we shared was not just about celebrating the joyful moments but about standing together in the face of the hard ones, ready to heal and grow as one.